yarnivores, spiderettes, and arachnids. Fiber Spider back again with another tutorial for you. And this is going to be a bit of a series because there are a lot of steps involved, and I'm going to show you how to knit a Fair Isle hat. Yes? And it seems a lot more daunting than it actually is. Yes, there are some steps involved. Yes, there is some technique involved. However, the main thing is if you can do a knit stitch, yes, you can do it. Yes, I have confidence in you. You can totally do it. And there are a lot of books on the subject and the history of Fair Isle knitting. Basically, it's a matter of taking two contrasting colors of yarn, and it's also called stranded knitting because you're typically working with the one strand, and then the one that you're not working with, there is what is called a float on the inside. So to do a flat piece generally is not recommended. That's why when you see a lot of Fair Isle knitting, typically it is in a sort of a tube type shape, either socks or hats or sweaters, mittens, gloves, that sort of thing. And because there is an inside and an outside to it. Of course, the outside is the side that you would want to see. We'll get into that. So first off, yes, you're going to need two contrasting colors of yarn. For this, I decided upon Vanna's Choice. I do love this yarn for Fair Isling because it's very crisp. It's very neat. I like it. And so the color on the left, we have Peacock. And the color on the right, we have Silver Blue. And, it's an acrylic yarn, and in spite of that, it is very nice and soft. You could use, say, a Red Heart Super Saver. However, I find that tends to be a little on the thicker side. So you'll find what works for you. Now, aside from your yarn, you are also going to need some circular needles. And this is recommended, although it is not absolutely necessary. I would recommend that you have two sizes of circular needles. These are both 16 inches, by the way. One is a 7 and one is an 8. We're going to start with the 7 because we're going to start with our ribbing. And then when we're done with the ribbing, we're going to switch to the 8s. If you don't have two sizes, that's all right. I would say if you only have the 8s, stick with the 8s. But if you can, go with the 7s first because it'll make your ribbing just a little bit tighter, and therefore it has that nice elasticity. And last but not least, you are going to need a stitch marker, or you could use a safety pin, a loop of yarn, what have you. But I love these guys. All right, so without further ado, let's get started. Alrighty, so I think that I'm going to start with my ribbing with the peacock color, and because I love this really rich blue-green that we have going on here. Now, keep in mind that this is going to be the predominant color of the piece, and it's going to be a really, really simple Fair Isle pattern. Nothing too crazy, not snowflakes or reindeer, just a very simple, basic, all-over pattern to give you the gist of what you need in order to do Fair Isling, on your own. So now typically I use about 100 stitches on my needle. So you're going to need a nice long tail to get started with. And so I'm bringing out lots of yarn, and I'm going to show you how to cast on the few first stitches, and then I'm going to do the rest off camera. Alright, so keeping in mind this is my size 7 needle that I've got going on here. Start with a Slipknot, like so. And you don't want these stitches to be super duper tight to begin with. Just your normal casting on, all right? So what you do is, going to go under the one, over there. So we've got 2. And we're going to need a total of 100 stitches. That is what works generally for me, for an adult-sized hat. Now, if you know your dimensions for how many stitches you need for the circumference of a hat that fits you, then by all means go for it. The only thing that I would recommend is that you have a total number of stitches that will be divisible by 4 for the Fair Isle pattern that we're going to be doing. So you could have 80 stitches, or 120 stitches, or, whatever really works for you. As long as it's ultimately divisible by 4, then you're good, okay? And that's really all there is to it for now. We will get into the fun stuff, believe you me. So I'm just going to keep doing my casting on of 100 stitches, and then when I reach 100, I will meet back up with you. All right then. Alrighty, so I have cast on 100 stitches onto my needles, and now what you're going to want to do is make sure that your stitches are not twisted. Very, very important when you're first starting out, because if they are, then you're going to end up with a Mobius, which is basically a loop with no no center, no outside edge, and it's, shall we say, problematic. All right, so we need to make sure that all of these stitches are, the easiest way to explain it is that all of the stitches are facing the inside and that they're not twisted round. Now, it may look like they are right now, but as long as they all ultimately go to the center without doing a complete loop around, then you're good, okay? So making sure that your stitches are not twisted, we then take our little stitch marker here, pop that on there, and we are going to get into our knitting. Now also, before you start, make sure that you aren't working with your tail end, but you're working with your actual working yarn. I can't tell you how many times I have done this. Excuse me. So, what we're going to do to start is going to be quite simply a 1-by-1 ribbing. And what it amounts to, excusez-moi, is you're going to knit the first stitch, like so, and make sure that the last stitch that you cast on, that it's not, killer tight, but tight enough. So we're going to knit this first stitch, like so, and then we are going to purl the next, and then knit, and then purl, and so on, and so on, and so on. That's, basically the 1-by-1 ribbing. Now, you could do a 2-by-2 ribbing, or a 3-to-1 ribbing. Personally, I like the nice, clean look of a 1-by-1. That's just me personally. I say to each their own, but I like the 1-by-1. You can do whatever ratio you want of purls versus knits, as long as, of course, it is divisible by your total number. Since I have 100 stitches, I could do, technically speaking, 3 knits, 2 purls, because 5 is divisible by 100. Sorry, 100 is divisible by 5. So whatever works for you, but this is what I'm going to be doing. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, I'm going to be going all the way around doing all of my stitches. And then, since I started with a knit stitch, so you could see these bumps. So we got, knit, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, etc., etc., etc. So this last stitch that I'm going to be stitching is going to be a purl stitch. And then, of course, this first one will be a knit stitch. So I'm just going to keep knitting along. And yeah, we'll get to it. All right. And so what you're going to want to do basically is, I would say about maybe an inch, 2 inches of ribbing, whatever works for you, as far as your style. It's not an exact science, and it doesn't particularly matter, just as long as you're happy with it. Okay? So I'm going to do about inch to 2 inches of ribbing. Okay. So I'll see you in a bit. Alrighty, so I'm almost completed with my first round of the 1x1 ribbing, and I decided to show you how I do it, on camera, just to be thorough. So I've got 4 more stitches here, no biggie. Alright, so let's do this. Alright, and so I've got a knit, and then a purl, and then a knit. Now also you want to be careful of your tail there. Alright, and then one last purl. Okay. Like so. And now this looks a little wonky, looks a little bit odd. However, not to worry. Anything can be fixed. All right? So what you're going to do now is put the yarn to the back, because you're going to do your knit stitch next, right? Now, you can pull that a little bit taut. However, that doesn't change the tension here, right? Again, not to worry, because later we will be able to fix that new problem. All right, so, and then also, I forgot to say, yes, transferring your stitch marker over. And now this next stitch, you want to try to make it nice and tight, if you can. And you just continue on with the knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, etc., etc., et al. Now, the reason why I say not to concern yourself too much is because with that tail end that we have right here, you can fix anything that needs fixing. See, right now, this stitch is a little bit lower than the stitch on this side, right? Well, in this particular case, you really don't need to worry, because you can take that, loop it through here, and then cinch it back. So it's really no big deal. Later on, I'm going to show you a trick how to avoid having jogs in your knitting, which is very, very, very helpful. But for right now, you really don't need to concern yourself with it. So, as I said before, just continue on with this knit 1, purl 1 ribbing for about 1 to 2 inches. More if that is your preference, by all means, go with it. And so I'm going to do the rest of, excuse me, I'm going to do the rest of this ribbing off camera, and I will meet back up with you, and I will show you what to do next. All right, so I'll see you when I'm there, and when you're there, and then we will be there. See you in a bit. Okie dokie, my dears. So I've been knitting for a bit in the 1x1 ribbing, and my length is about 1 3/4-ish inches, thereabouts. This does not have to be precise. It just, this is going to be the band around your forehead here. So, to each their own. So I'm almost done with this round, and I'm still on the size 7 needles, and I just have a couple more stitches to go, and then we are going to swap over to the size 8s, very simply. Alright, so I'm just going to do a couple more of these stitches. So I left off with a purl, so got a knit, and we will swap over to the larger needles. And when we do that, we're just going to do a round with just the knit stitch. Sort of evens things out a little. Alright, and a purl stitch. Okay, now, there we are, yarn to the back. Okay, so now, what we are going to do is, before we start doing our actual knitting, we are going to transfer the stitches from the size 7s onto the size 8s. Now, best way to do that is, well, first remove our stitch marker there, and to scooch the stitches down onto the needle so that they're not about to come off. That helps. And now I'm going to start transferring our stitches. Now it's really quite simple. You're just slipping them on like so. And be sure that while you're doing this, that you're getting all of the plies of your yarn onto your needle. And so I'm just going to do this all the way around, just slipping my needles from one needle to the next, and slide them down as needs be. And it does get easier as you go along. And so I'm going to do the rest of this off camera, and then I will show you what to do next. Alrighty, I'll be right back. Alrighty, so I have transferred all of my stitches by slipping them all purlwise from my 7s to my 8s, and now that I've slipped all my stitches, I'm going to put my stitch marker back on, and now I'm going to do one round, just one round of just all knit stitches, and because that way it'll create a bit of a buffer between our ribbing here and then the pattern, the Fair Isle pattern that we are going to be doing in our next part. Now, what I'm doing right now, as far as showing you how to cast on the number of stitches, how to do the ribbing and so forth, technically speaking, yes, this same exact process could be done with any knit hat, just about. It's a very basic, foundation for any knit hat. For the sake of this tutorial and for my purposes, I decided that I was going to show you the whole process, so you can apply, what I've shown you already to most hats, this hat included, of course, So I'm just going to knit my way around for the rest of this round until I hit my marker here, and then we will commence on with our Fair Isling. It's going to be a very simple, easy repeat, and I've seen it in a number of places, and it's going to be very, very basic and very easy to follow. If you want to do something more complex, by all means, go for it. Who am I to say no? But if you're just starting off, I would strongly suggest doing a very, very simple repeat, because that way you won't have to perpetually look at the pattern, the chart pattern, which can get very frustrating. Also, another thing that I would strongly suggest is that for when you're just starting off, not to use a pattern where there are too many stitches of the same color, because Fair Isling is a binary system. It's predominantly just two colors. And so you go back from A to B, back to A again. And so I would suggest that if you are going to use a pattern, do not use one where there are more than, say, 3 or 4 stitches of the same color in a row. Because if you go beyond that, then you're going to have to do what is called capturing floats. And I will explain how to do that later. But for right now, I just want to show you the basics and how to get started. Okay? So I'm going to finish this round, and then we will get started on the next part. So I'll see you in the next video.